No thickness planer? No problem. No jointer? No problem. I've got 5 jigs here that can take the place of that, plus a couple of jigs that you may not have seen before. Let's go. Now, Rockler did send a couple of these over for me to check out. If you'd like to check them out for yourself, I'm going to put links in the description and the pinned comment. And of course, you can scan the QR code with your phone to go check it out if you're watching these on TV. Now, let me show you that you can save $1,000 by not having to have a planer or a jointer in your shop with these jigs. And yes, it can face joint and edge joint. First up, the Rockler board flattening jig. You can use almost any mid-size router in this jig, and it will do a phenomenal job at flattening boards, in other words, face jointing, or if you're building cutting boards or charcuterie boards, or you just need to straighten a board out that's twisted or bowed, this will do it. You have an 18 by 28 inch workspace to flatten boards, so 18 inches wide. Most benchtop planers are 13 inches. This can go up to 18 inches wide, which is really good. And then of course, 28 inches long, which is a really good capacity here. If you need more capacity than that, they do have a larger version meant for slabs or longer boards that I'll also link to in the description, pin, comment, QR code, all that. But this, I think, is perfect for the small shop because this is basically taking the place of a jointer up to 28 inches long. And you can do a lot more than just joint the face. You can flatten boards, you can thickness plane boards basically with this. Let me show you everything you get and how it works. First, we gotta unbox the jig. Everything comes nicely packed, but be very careful because the instruction booklet is actually inside of another box, so you may miss that if you're not very careful. I almost did. Before you mount the jig, you have to cut out some type of base for it. And I'm just gonna use 3/4 inch plywood, but you can use MDF or whatever you have on hand. And the minimum size required is 26 inches by 41 inches. I went a little bit over just to have some overhang on each side. Just makes it easier. I think mine was 28 by 42. And this is quickly becoming one of my favorite tape measures. I started out with the Fast Cap old standby, but this is the lefty righty. No matter which direction you're holding it, you can see the numbers upright. And then it also has the 8ths or actually 16ths marked out on there, and I kind of thought, well, that's only for beginners. But what it does is it makes it very easy when I'm trying to line this up to find that 1/4 inch every time. It's just easier, especially with my aging eyes. Now I'm gonna cut this piece of plywood out using my track saw. You can use a table saw, you can use a straight edge and a circular saw, whatever you have. Don't let the track saw deter you from this. It's very easy to cut out this piece of plywood. Just use what you got. But if you are looking for a track saw, this Milwaukee, next level. I have several track saws in the shop that I've tested over the last couple of years, and I always reach for the Milwaukee when I need to actually cut something. It's just good. But it is time for a blade change. This old blade is pretty dull. I'm gonna go with a higher tooth count this time, just because I cut mostly plywood, and that's what you need for plywood is a higher tooth count. Mounting the rails, very, very easy. You're gonna mount the 2 long rails first, and I'm gonna start on one side and just kind of line it up with the edge. There's no precision here. You're gonna line these 2 rails up parallel with each other, but I do want it to look fairly decent, so I did line them up. You're gonna use an 1/8 inch drill bit to drill some pilot holes. There's gonna be 4 down through there, and then you'll use the included screws to mount them to the board. Now you have to measure over 22 1/4 inches for this next rail. I'm just gonna make some marks here as reference, and I'm gonna use the measuring tape to get everything precise before I nail it down. Same thing here, pilot drill with those screws. The good thing is that the holes are slotted, which will allow some minor tweaks if you need them later. One thing I wanna make sure is that we line up the ends of this rail to the end of my jig board here. This is square, so I'm gonna reference off of that. That way when I bring this trolley all the way to the back, it bumps out equally on either side. That's kind of what we're looking for there. All right, now we gotta mount our router to the router base that comes with this. It comes with several different packs of screws for mounting whatever router you have. It should fit most mid-size routers. I see the Bosch 1617 is in the pictures they're using. There's also a Festool router. I'm going to use this DeWalt plunge router because that's the one I have free here. But there are mounting screws included, so you don't use the shorter ones that come with your router plate. Also, it's a good idea to have some type of magnetic tray to drop in bolts and pieces so you don't lose them. Again, as you see, the base that comes with this has a bunch of different hole patterns, so it should fit any mid-size router that you have, but I would check the link to this product, link in the description, pin, comment, all that stuff, so you can go make sure your router is going to fit. All right, when you get ready to put the router on, when you put it on this trolley and set it down, you should push, you'll hear a satisfying click. You'll know it's locked in place on both sides. Now this is ready to run. All we got to do, get a board to flatten and put the bit in that's going to flatten the boards. You can use a couple different styles, which I'll talk about. Now, if you've assembled this correctly, everything should go back and forth across perfectly smooth and down the jig smooth. If it doesn't, there is some micro adjustments available that you can do to get everything dialed in. That is if both of these rails are perfectly parallel. Double check that first. But when I assembled it, paralleled everything up, everything is dead flat. I think you're going to be very surprised, because I was, at how dead accurate this is thicknessing boards, which I'm fixing to show you how to do. All right, if you're flattening boards, you're trying to get everything nice and flush, there's a couple of different bits you can use. First, you can use just a standard straight bit, just like this. However, while using just a standard straight bit like this, there is a drawback because it may leave a little bit of a kind of a dimple or a crease because of how this bit is shaped. You see the points on either side. It is flat on the bottom, but it still leaves a little bit of a groove there. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. You could also use a spoil board or spoil flattening bit. These are usually for CNCs to flatten the spoil board when you're using those on the CNC. However, this one is specifically made for board flattening, and the difference here is it has a little bit of a radius on each side, and that's going to prevent tear out, and this is completely flat across the top, or will be the bottom of the bit, so you get a nice flat surface. I'm going to be using this one because it's better for this application. However, if you have these, you could probably just use these and see what kind of results you get before purchasing one of these. But if you're new to this, I would highly recommend just picking up the flattening bit. Now, the great thing about this jig is this board was actually thicker on one end and thinner on the other. And it was also twisted a little bit so you can see it rocking. We need to fix that, so I'm going to shim this up. Now, Rockler does have these claw-looking clamps that will clamp down. These are live edge clamps to clamp these type of boards down, screw it straight to the jig, which work really well. If the board is flat enough, you can also double stick tape it at your own risk. You do you. I'm going to double stick tape this one because it is flat enough, but these clamps that you see here will absolutely work. They grip and claw and pull the thing down. They actually have two different clamping styles. One kind of leverages it on, and one's kind of a hook that kind of bends down and bites onto it. Now, because this board is thicker on one end, thinner on the other, I have to shim this up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just take a standard 3/4 inch piece of plywood, double stick tape it to my jig, and then double stick tape my board onto that piece of plywood. That'll raise it up enough so that my router can get all the way down to where it needs to, especially on the thinner end. Now, this thing is going to be dusty. There's a lot of dust because this is a big old beefy bit. You're taking off a lot of material. There is no dust collection per se on this model. They have a larger model that absolutely includes dust collection, but it is meant for slabs more than just like boards like this. This is really good for cutting boards, even smaller boards like this if you're just wanting to flatten things out. But if you're wanting to do longer stock, wider stock, the larger option may be the way to go for you. Now, once I have everything stuck, I've got everything shimmed up so nothing is moving. Make sure nothing is moving before you start. I want to start about a 1/16 of an inch deep, taking about a 1/16 inch off every pass. You're just going to move back and forth across the grain of this, and you'll notice, or you may notice, that because this Rockler bit has that little curve radius on each side, it's not blowing out either side. It's coming off really nice and smooth, which I was actually quite surprised by. Another thing I was surprised by is how easy this is. Very easy to move back and forth. The cutting's as smooth as butter. It's just nice. Now, once I get one side perfectly flat, we're going to take this up off of it, turn it over, and stick it to the other side. That way I can flatten this in. Now I should, after we get done, have a perfectly parallel board. That's what we're after. Once we're done with both sides, you may see a little bit of lines in there. It almost looks like this bit is leaving some type of lines or not cutting all the way perfect, but what you're actually seeing is how the wood grain is laying down either way. It's kind of like if you look at a Major League Baseball field, the way they cut the grass, it looks like stripes on there. This is kind of a similar type thing you're seeing. It's just the way the wood grain is laid. 120 grit sandpaper, very briefly on this, makes it smooth, and you don't even see those lines anymore. Now I want to know how flat this thing is. Is it the same thickness on one end as it is on the other? Because that's what I want. I want this thing to be perfectly flat and the same thickness. I'm going to take this handy dandy caliper here, 0.0740 on one end. I'm going to go to the opposite corner over here, 0.0745. How many thousandths? Is that 10 thousandths of an inch? You don't need to be more perfect than that in woodworking. That is absolutely dead accurate on from one end to the other with this little jig. That is impressive. Now, what type of router do you want to use in this? I would highly suggest at least a 2 or 2.25 horsepower router. This is the DW618. This is one of my favorite routers. I have recommended this router for a very long time. Also, the Bosch 1617 is an amazing router, especially for the price. Both of these are a similar price, the Bosch and the DeWalt. I've compared both of these in a comparison video a while back. It just depends on what color you like. They're both really nice routers. I like this one. I've used this one a ton. The Bosch stays on my router table, which is why I chose this one to use for this jig. What's awesome about this jig is if you already have one flat side of a board, you can literally just double stick tape it down, and then you can run your thickness planer, your router over this and replace a thickness planer to get it the perfect thickness that you're wanting. But if you have twisted or bowed or cupped boards, this acts as a jointer, a face jointer, jointing that face. So if you looked at the price of planers, a very cheap one could cost you about $300 to $400. Usually closer to the $400 range for a decent one. If you look at jointers, also $300 to $400 for the budget levels. So already you're at $600 to $800 on a very budget level planer or jointer. This could take the place of both of those, especially combined with the next jig. Number 2 jig on this list, I've shown this before several times on the channel, you may have seen it. This is my jointing jig. There's plans available on my website for this. It's using the match fit dovetail system. It's very easy to make this. Extremely easy. You just need a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. This one's about 10 inches wide. It doesn't have to be exact. You do you. If you want 12 inches, 14, 8, whatever you want. This one's about 10. I made it also about 35, 36 inches long. The longer it is, the longer board you'll be able to joint, but you'll also run into how much of this can fit onto the table saw before it gets too back heavy. So I keep it about 3 feet. So to make this jig is absolutely one of the easiest things you can do. First, you're just gonna need a dovetail bit from Micro Jig and a palm router, and then you're gonna route across the plywood here. You're gonna put about 5 of these in there. There's no magic here. I did a groove 4 inches from each end and then 7 inches on center after that. The 2 long grooves right here are 2 inches from the side. Those aren't necessary, but they do give you some clamping options as well as some stop blocks if you're using this as a tapering jig, because you can use this as a tapering jig as well as a jointing jig. From there, that is it. If you wanted to put a runner that goes into your miter slot, you absolutely could. I've never have, and it's worked perfectly fine. All you have to do is take your board. You're gonna set it on this jig, and you're gonna clamp it down using some of those dovetail clamps. And then you're gonna use this against the fence. Then you're just gonna make your cut with this hanging over the leading edge. When it cuts this edge off, that is a perfectly straight edge. From there, you just flip this over, take the jig off, put this on the table saw, cut the other edge. You've got 2 parallel edges now, so now you don't have to have a joiner. You've jointed the face with this jig, you've jointed the edge with this jig, and you saved you probably $1,000 if you go planer and a jointer together. Next, one of the coolest thin rip jigs that I've seen to date. I have tried these before. I've shown them on the channel many times before. This one has a couple cool little built-in features. First, just like any thin rip jig, right on the end are 2 little rollers. What that's for is so the stock can be rolling by very easily. If you don't know what a thin rip jig, this allows you to cut repeat thicknesses of boards or thin strips on your table saw. This fits into the miter slot. Use this knob to tighten it down. When you tighten it down, it squares itself up. Then you can use the front knob, loosen that off, and you can move this anywhere you need it. The cool feature here is right here is a little indicator that you can use to set exactly where you want it. So in this case, I'm gonna set it on the 1. If this gets moved, or if I need to take it off and put it back on, I can put it back in the exact same place on that 1 and rip the same size strip. That's a cool feature. Overall, this thing works extremely well. You can cut as many thin strips as you want using that over and over, repeatable, accurate, which is good. The next jig on the list is this. It's a clamp, but this is absolutely a jig. This is from Rockler as well. This is a corner clamping jig that has a couple of features built in that I haven't seen before. First, on the bottom, it has nice grippy feet, so when you set it down, it doesn't slip and slide. It does stick pretty good. But also, if you wanted to mount this to your bench, there is a way you could screw this down. So if you have a place where you're always assembling the same thing in the corners, you could do that. This is really good if you're using smaller stock, like these 2 pieces you see here. If you're doing like picture frames or just having to do a butt joint of some type, if you're doing dowels or anything like that, to hold it in place while everything gets connected. This is also really good for cabinets or panels. So if you're joining 2 pieces of plywood together, these are excellent because these little clamps will absolutely hold them perfectly 90, as you see here. These little screw clamps do have a little quick release, that silver button on top. Push that, it can move that quickly and get it into place, and then once you let that go, you can tighten everything back up. A little hidden feature here that you may not know, this is exactly 3/4 of an inch, so you can use 3/4 stock for supports outside, or if you have longer pieces you're trying to clamp up, you just use a piece of 3/4 inch plywood or something like that, give you some extra support. These super nice. The next jig is this little thing. I showed this a couple of years ago and it did very well because it is so useful. This is a crosscut sled or crosscut jig for your router table. Now, if you've ever tried to cut across the grain on a thinner strip on a router table, if you don't have something like this to support it, it can get hairy. It can be dangerous. So you want a crosscut jig. This is very simple. A 10-inch square piece of 3/4 inch plywood, and then about a 3-inch strip here that goes across. Just gonna glue this down. All that is a handle. That's all you need, some type of handle. These 2 holes are a mystery. What are they for? They're just giving you some clamping options. If you needed to clamp down a thin piece or a short piece, you could do that here without having to get your hands too close to there. That's why those holes are there, and it's just used to hang on the wall to get it up out of your way. After this is made, all you do is use your fence as a guide, and keep pressure towards the fence, and then you can cut across the grain like you see here very easily. This, very simple, very cheap to make, but could save you from a kickback or a dangerous cut. And as a reminder, I do have build plans for this little jig if you need those, but there's also a lot of other build plans on my website at 731woodworks.com. Click on the store button. You're gonna find plans for router tables, miter stations, furniture, all kinds of good stuff there. Just head over to the website and check them out. If you like this video, you'd probably benefit from knowing how to build a crosscut sled. Right there, my safer crosscut sled video. Click in that box to get you the big old virtual fist bump. Seriously, nice little handles, keeps your hands safe. Go check it out.